1 minute ago, the mining world had stood still. What Rick Ness's crew pulled from the claim wasn't gold. It was something far more dangerous, something that threatened to unravel everything he had built, every bond he had forged, and every truth he had ever relied on. This was a discovery that would shake the gold rush to its core. The Yukon sun hung low over Duncan Creek, casting long shadows across Rick's operation. For weeks, the crew had been pushing harder than ever, digging deeper into terrain that had already tested them. Equipment failures, personal tensions, and dwindling yields had turned what should have been a triumphant season into a nightmare of frustration. The wash plant had broken down 3 times in as many weeks, each failure costing hours and thousands of dollars, resources they could ill afford to lose. Fuel prices had soared, slicing into already razor-thin margins. The bedrock that promised rich gold deposits proved stubborn and inconsistent, giving just enough color to keep the crew moving, but never enough to justify the brutal effort. But nothing could have prepared them for what lay beneath 20 feet of frozen permafrost and century-old debris. When the excavator's bucket breached a collapsed tunnel system no one knew existed, the operation came to a grinding halt. The splintering of wood and shifting earth echoed across the valley, then silence fell. A tense, heavy quiet that made every crew member freeze. This wasn't the glittering reward of gold that had drawn generations north. This was something far darker. Buried deliberately beneath the ground were remnants of an old mining camp, rusted tools, scorched timbers, and personal effects left to decay for over a century. Boots, tin cups, even a harmonica, frozen in time, told of lives that had been cut short violently and suddenly. Rick Ness stood at the edge of the excavation, drained of color, the weight of what lay before him pressing down like a physical force. His crew gathered around in tense silence, their breath visible in the cold air, everyone aware they had crossed a line that could not be uncrossed. The younger members exchanged nervous glances, curiosity tangled with fear. The veterans, hardened by decades in the Yukon, stood stiffly, arms crossed, their expressions betraying unease. This was no longer about gold. It was about legacy, about history pressing down on land that had already claimed too much. When Rick bent to lift a weathered photograph from the rubble, his hands shook despite years of labor-hardened strength. Everyone watching knew the moment would redefine everything they thought they knew about the gold rush, and about Rick Ness himself. A photograph showed miners, solemn and worn, standing before a sluice box. In the corner, barely visible, was a name that would haunt Rick for weeks. Behind the confident exterior of a self-made mining boss, Rick Ness was struggling. Fans didn't see the weight loss, the sleepless nights poring over maps and legal documents, the panic attacks, or the secret health crisis that had consumed his off-season. Financial pressures, from equipment loans to crew salaries, threatened bankruptcy with every season. Yet he pushed forward, determined to prove he wasn't beaten. The personal cost was high. Carla, his longtime partner, pulled away, and friends barely recognized the once easygoing musician Rick had become, hardened, cautious, and isolated. Duncan Creek, where he'd staked his claim, held secrets darker than gold. Abandoned camps, disappearances, and violent disputes erased from history. Among the debris, a water-damaged journal revealed a Ness name, possibly linking his ancestors to the tragedy. In Yukon mining, reputations last generations, and the discovery could ruin him, his crew, and everything he'd built. Rick faced an impossible choice: report the truth and risk ruin, or stay silent to protect his operation. Standing over the excavation, he realized that whatever he chose would define him far more than any gold ever could. The discovery at Duncan Creek didn't just threaten Rick, it exposed cracks in his crew. Mining teams are like families, but under pressure, tensions rise, loyalty falters, and small whispers of doubt can explode into conflict. Crew members began researching the claim's dark past, growing uneasy about disturbing ground tied to violence and death. Questions about Rick's knowledge and secrecy spread, eroding trust. The breaking point came when a senior operator quit publicly, accusing Rick of leading them onto cursed ground. The confrontation, captured on camera, revealed how isolation and secrecy had changed him in the eyes of his crew. Rick realized that running the operation wasn't enough. He needed to rebuild trust that might already be broken. 3 weeks later, archaeologists arrived. Rick had chosen transparency over self-preservation, reporting the discovery. Their investigation uncovered a strongbox with documents revealing the truth. His ancestor, not a perpetrator, had tried to stop the violence, documenting crimes and dying while seeking justice. Rick's family name was cleared, but the burden of history now rested on him. Preserving the site meant his mining operation was effectively over. Financial losses were massive, and starting anew was impossible without capital. Yet Rick understood that sometimes the right choice isn't the profitable one. Character is defined by what you do when no one is forcing your hand. Media attention exploded. Some praised Rick's transparency, others criticized his lack of research. Fans debated, heroic or reckless. Through it all, Rick stayed quiet, burdened by history and expectation. He shut down Duncan Creek with the Yukon Heritage Department, documenting and preserving the site. Though he could no longer mine it, he gave voice to miners silenced for over a century. Financially, the cost was brutal. Debts, equipment loans, crew pay, all threatened to overwhelm him. Bankruptcy loomed, but admitting defeat went against everything he'd built. Personally, his relationship with Carla ended quietly but decisively, leaving Rick to face the collapse of both business and personal life alone. Yet amid the wreckage, clarity emerged. Stripped of title and gold, he rediscovered his core: music, integrity, judgment, leadership, and the ability to make hard choices. Options quietly formed: mining consultant, media work, speaking engagements, or bankruptcy as a path to rebuild. The Yukon mining community watched, divided. Some saw cautionary lessons, others respect for principled choices. Rick learned the hardest truth of mining. It's never just about gold. It's about ambition, legacy, and knowing when to stop. As winter approached, the Yukon prepared to freeze, and Rick stood at the edge of his claim. The site was now protected, tunnels documented and sealed, artifacts preserved in museums. His ancestors' story, long silenced, was finally heard. Rick understood now. Sometimes changing everything means losing everything first. The gold you seek isn't always the gold you find. The story you tell isn't always the one you expect, but it is yours, and that is enough. Rick Ness's journey was far from over. What comes next may redefine not only his career, but the future of mining and Gold Rush television itself. If you loved learning about the iconic stars of old Hollywood, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more behind-the-scenes stories, trivia, and all things vintage glam. Join the conversation in the comments below. Who's your favorite old Hollywood celebrity and why? Make sure to ring the bell so you never miss a new video on the golden era of cinema.